Welcome to the Legacy Leaders Podcast. Are you doing the best for your client to help them create their legacy? Are you creating a plan that goes far beyond finances to help people ensure that it becomes the driving force behind all decisions? On this podcast, hosts Katie Beth Hand and Stan Miller will help you with growing your practice and your clients' peace of mind. Together, they bring the best and brightest minds to share with you how to help your clients develop their best legacy. And now, here are your hosts, Katie Beth and Stan.
All right, so welcome to Legacy Podcast. I'm here with Jake Carlson with Life Plan Legal Arizona. Just to tell you a little bit about Jake, he is an estate planning attorney, recognized business leader, inspiring presenter, and popular podcast host. He is personable and connects immediately with others. A natural storyteller, he loves listening to your story and exploring what matters most to you. Jake earned his law degree from the California Western School of Law and concurrently with a business degree and an MBA from San Diego State University. He attended law school in creative problem solving scholarship and was awarded that in 2005 with the Outstanding Case Award for the Best MBA Consulting Project. He is a licensed member of the State Bar of Arizona. Jake has personally presented over 200 groups in 27 states on estate planning and protecting your legacy. He is the author of over 100 leadership articles on topics of influence and legacy, family vision, and the values-based estate planning process. He has had the privilege of interviewing hundreds of recognized executives, and since 2014, hosted the Family Before Fortune and the Modern Leadership Podcast. Jake is a self-proclaimed adventure junkie and loves to try out new and exciting things. He has scaled volcanoes in the Philippines, backpacked through 11 national parks, rock climbed on 2 continents, and scuba dove with sharks. With his family, he spent time living in 12 countries, from Beijing, Myanmar to Paris, France, and overcoming robbery, red-eye flights, and Haggis while learning to love the rich culture of the world. Jake and his wife have 3 kids, 2 daughters and a son, and live in East Valley, Arizona. They all love travel and spending time creating family traditions. Jake, so glad to have you here today.
Eddie, it's great to be with you. I should have given you a lot shorter bio. I didn't realize how long that sounded.
I can see now why we've been so excited to go ahead and have you on. So first off, to begin there, Jake, let's kind of go ahead and go back a little bit. Why did you go to law school?
Yeah, I mean, this is the perfect podcast for me because I'm a storyteller and you're asking stories. What's the story behind law school?
Yes.
You know, when I graduated undergrad, I knew that I had more schooling ahead of me because I graduated with a, drumroll, philosophy degree. So I knew I had more school. I was working in business as a stockbroker, and the guy I was working for got sued. And during that lawsuit, he would say things like, I wish I understand a little bit of the law. I wish I knew just a little bit about court procedure or securities regulation or constitutional law. And I said, oh, I'm going to get my MBA. I'll take a, famous last words, couple law classes. And about 3 years later, I'm sitting for the bar and I'm asking myself how I got on this path, but it's been such a great path and journey. I guess I would say I'm a reluctant attorney. I didn't necessarily set out to come this direction, but I've loved it ever since.
That's awesome. Great story. Great story. And so now we hear a little bit about the law degree and being an attorney. What was the path that led to estate planning?
Yeah, so right out of law school. So I graduated law school in 2005. And if you remember that time period, we were just inching our way towards the financial crisis. And being kind of a business guy, a business background guy, I thought I would go to New York. I'd work on, Wall Street, something like that. But at the time that I graduated, there wasn't a lot of people hiring for business, but there were a lot of law firms hiring. And I happened to find a great position working with a nonprofit, a national nonprofit that needed a tax attorney that could travel all across the nation, literally get on a flight every Monday morning, come home every Friday night, and during the week, sit down with individuals and talk them through estate planning with a charitable interest. So high net worth individuals with a lot of philanthropic passion. And so I spent 6 years, literally 10 hours a day, 5 days a week, flying all over the country, talking to people about how they set their plan up to make it so that their families were healthy, their kids had opportunities, they weren't destroyed, they could protect from some of these crazy things like substance abuse or gambling addictions. And I really loved working with the generation of individuals that were, at the time, we called them the silent generation. This was before the baby boomers. Now we're starting to see a lot more baby boomers and even some Gen X's come through the estate planning world. And of course, my goal is to get more Gen Z and millennials in. But at the time, I loved sitting with that silent generation and hearing their stories about going to war and coming back and starting their families and putting down roots and creating, work ethic and work culture. And so I just took that and parlayed it into now what I run my own business, Life Plan Legal Arizona, where, we love to hear these stories and kind of use the stories to create an ongoing legacy for the family.
That is great. I love hearing your passion as well in this. So thank you for sharing that. Can you go a little bit more into what was that transition from the first firm you were with to Life Planning Legal Arizona?
Well, it didn't go a straight linear path, as I'm sure all of your listeners are thinking to themselves, my life has never gone a linear path. Why should his? Right. After 6 years of kind of traveling around the United States a lot, I had 2 kids. My oldest was 6, my youngest was 3. And I remember coming home, my 6-year-old was a kindergartner. I guess she was probably 5. I came home and I always tell the joke that she said, "Oh, here's my weekend daddy." And I thought to myself, oh no, who's the weekday daddy? I'm on the road too much. So I need to make a transition. Mm-hmm. So I took a transition for a role up in San Jose, California. And I did that for 6 years. I was the chief operating officer of a small company that we grew pretty large. And I found that even though I had taken a step away from the legal world and kind of walking through estate planning and that type of thing, I was still gone a lot. I was still working, 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. And so we decided as a family to take a year and just spend that time as a family. And so what we did was we sold everything. We're one of those crazy families that you saw on Instagram or whatever it was back then, Twitter. We sold all, the beds and the couches and the refrigerator. We sold the car and jumped on the airplane. We took 5 carry-on suitcases because I have 3 kids now. At the time, when I took the new job, I had 2 kids, but then we had our third. And so we took our 3 kids, my wife and I, we each had a carry-on, we each had a backpack, and we decided to go explore the world. Spent 6 months in Asia, 6 months in Europe. And then at the end of that year, I said to my wife, look, we've now lived everywhere in the world. Where do you want to live? Where do you want to put down roots, have our kids go to high school, make friends, have community? And she said, Gilbert, Arizona. So we moved to Gilbert, Arizona. Love it. We now live in Queen Creek. We just moved just a little bit ago. But during that process, I said, look, I need to work. There's stuff that needs to be done. Let's form Life Plan Legal Arizona. So I formed it. And you'll notice, Eddie, I know you talk to a lot of people out there. What's different about me? How am I different from all the other estate planners? 2 things. In my 18 years experience working for a lot of different people, one thing I hated was always looking at my watch. Hey, it's been 30 minutes. Your consult's over. We need to kind of move on. I didn't want to be a watch looker. So when I started my firm, I said, no watches. We're going to meet with people and talk about their story, what they need. And if it takes 35 minutes, if it takes 41 minutes, that's okay. We're here for you. The second thing is I didn't like, and no offense to all my great colleagues out there that are doing wonderful things, but for me personally, I did not like to be the lawyer that said, hey, look, I went to law school. I'm so smart. Just listen to me. Do what I say. Sign here. What I wanted to do with the heart of an educator is say, this is why we do this. I mean, our trusts are 40 to 50 pages long. Some of them can get as high as 90 pages. There's a lot going on in there. So we like to sit down and walk you through it. So that's kind of the transition. I hope I didn't go too deep for you, Eddie.
No, excellent answer. Thank you again. I love hearing, like you said, not just the what behind your answer, but the why. So thank you again for just sharing those passionate whys. And I know you kind of alluded to this already a little bit there, Jake, but could you go into a little bit more detail about what is the idea? Who is the ideal client for you?
Yeah, so I mean, we really focus on the clients that have a net worth. Sorry about the fire truck going past. We really focus on clients with a net worth usually between about $500,000 and $2 million. The reason for that is because there's a lot of great attorneys out there working with these very high-end, large estates, trying to avoid taxes. And I often say, in the 90s, when we would do estate planning, it was all tax focused. We were really worried about what would happen. Would our money be taken by the government? But nowadays, because the exemption has risen so high, 99.9% of us don't have to worry about taxes. So estate planning has shifted from tax avoidance or tax preparation to something else. And in my mind, what that shifted to is this idea of let's make this as smooth as possible for people who are obviously going to be dealing with some emotional loss when mom and dad pass away. Oftentimes, we're talking about families where the children need to step into the role of executor, or what we call in Arizona personal representative, or trustee, or beneficiaries of some of these accounts. They need to step into this role right at the same time that they're dealing with the loss of a loved one, emotional loss. And so our primary goal is, how do we make that transition simpler, smoother? How do we make it so that there's less stress going on? So that's been the primary goal. Obviously we still want to avoid tax, but then the second thing is we want to stay out of the courts. And I hope that you don't have any judges listening to this podcast, but I often say to my clients, look, whenever you get the courts involved, you can guarantee three things, right? It's going to take time, it's going to cost money, and somebody's going away unhappy. Somebody's going to fight about something. How do we avoid that? We create a special plan that can operate outside of the court system so that you don't have to worry about the time and the money involved, and of course the fighting that happens anytime you get the courts involved. And so that's kind of become our philosophy when it comes to approaching the estate plan. So your question, long answer to a short question, ideal client for us is anybody that wants to make it smooth for their loved ones. Oftentimes people think of estate planning as, hey, what happens to my stuff after I pass away? Well, I often joke, hey, when I pass away, I'm bouncing the last check I write anyway. I don't care what happens to my stuff. I am much more concerned about what happens to myself while I'm still alive, but can't make decisions. Statistically, that's 76% of us are going to experience a period of needing help making decisions. So who's going to make decisions? Well, if I can't. And second of all, how do I make this smooth? How do I make this easy for those I'm going to leave behind? Because me, I'm going to peace out.
Jake, your answers, I hope that the audiences will really marinate on the words that you said. You've brought up some very important points. This is more than just transactional. This is how do people find you? What's the best way for people to find you there, Jake?
We're everywhere. I mean, we're on all of the socials. We're on the web. We have 2 offices. We have, signs up. But, the best way that people have been finding us is just word of mouth. Just their friends are telling friends or telling friends. And it's just been great. I'll tell you, my favorite thing is Google reviews. I mean, people love to leave Google reviews and then other people see them. Lifeplanlegalaz.com. That's our website. You can go there and get all sorts of information. Eddie, one thing that we do, we write a blog article every single day. We have for 3 years. There's over 700 articles all about estate planning, guardianship, conservatorship, powers of attorney, wills, trusts, irrevocable trusts, conservatorship, you name it. When it comes to this area of law, we write about it on a daily basis because we want to be educators. Like I mentioned earlier, I'm an educator at heart. I want people to understand the why behind the what that we do.
Excellent, excellent. And I know there, Jake, that you've touched upon this a little bit more, but any other common misconceptions that you work with or that you feel that potential clients have when they're looking to work with you?
Oh, yes. We get all the misconceptions. So let me give you a couple of them that are very, very common. One is, oh, trusts, those are for rich people, or trusts, those are for trust fund babies or people that you want to just support. I'm not in that area. No, actually, trusts are for everybody. Almost everybody can enjoy a trust or benefit from having a trust. The people who don't necessarily need a trust is if you don't own a home, or if you're single, or if all of your children are children of the same two parents. These are all things that are less common more and more as we move forward. We have all sorts of definitions of families and groups getting together. Trusts are not just for rich people. The second thing is that wills are a tax by the government, or probate. I'm sorry, not wills. Wills go through probate. That's the third misconception, by the way. And maybe I'll start with that one. The third misconception is that wills avoid probate. No. Wills equal probate. Wills equal probate. Wills equal probate. I say it so many times because people, for some reason, they have this thought, oh, I have a very simple estate. I have just my checking account, and maybe I live in a mobile home. And when I pass away, I have a will. It's going to be super easy. Maybe, but wills equal probate. In order to use that will, we need to open probate. What's probate? Well, it's the court babysitting the transition of your assets. So that's a misconception. And then the third misconception is that trusts are so much more expensive or so much more complicated than wills. And one of the things, sometimes I put our trust in front of a client and they'll say to me, they'll go, oh, Jake, that's 50 pages. That's complicated. And I say, it's reverse what you normally would think. The longer your trust is, oftentimes we can clarify the way that we want things to proceed. And so having a little bit longer actually makes it simpler because it leaves less for interpretation. It clarifies what you think. So Eddie, I know you get me on talking. It's like an Energizer bunny, you put a quarter in me and I just keep going. But
no,
those
I
are
love
the three
this.
misconceptions.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you. As we know, sometimes with misconceptions, things can still go awry. Can you share a story of a time of it going wrong?
Yeah. So one of the things, Eddie, that's really important about the way I run my law firm, I do not do conflict. I do not do litigation. There's a lot of great attorneys out there that will litigate a will or litigate an estate. That's not us. In fact, our tagline is planning that prevents conflict. Our whole goal is to avoid any conflict, avoid any court. And so oftentimes people will come in and they'll say, Jake, we've got a great plan. We have nobody's fighting. Can you help us? We'll start helping. And 5 times in the last 12 months, we've had a estate plan that has gone conflict, has gone nuclear. Definitely, when we start looking at estate planning, when we start adding the emotion of an aging parent or an ill parent, or financing or funding for long-term care of a parent, or we add dollars and cents in after a parent dies, what we call inheritance. Anytime you add emotion and money into the same pot and shake it all up, you're going to get some spillover. And so, yes, we've seen a couple of times, like I said, 5 times in the last year where something has gone a little bit awry. I'll give you just one quick story. We had a family, husband and wife, married for 39 years. Second marriage, each of them had children from previous relationships. Husband starts to have some diminished capacity. It starts to go pretty quickly. Husband doesn't quite know what's going on. Mom is stepping in, or I say wife is stepping in, trying to care for husband, put him into the proper facility. Uh-oh, guess who shows up? Stepson, son of father. Dad doesn't need to be in a facility. Dad needs to be in my house. Dad needs to be paying me to take care of him. Dad needs me to control his assets. Uh-oh, now we have wife of 39 years in conflict with son of 50 years or something like that. And dad not in a capacity to say, I want A or I want B. When those types of things happen, it's really wonderful to start with a plan, with a solid foundation, and not try to create a plan or create a foundation with all the turmoil and chaos that's happening. And we see this more and more when we start seeing, Eddie, if I can just go back in time a little bit and talk about the silent generation. When the silent generation came back from war, they often went to school in their hometown. They often bought a house in the same town that they grew up in. They put down their roots and raised their children. They often sat on, city councils or boards or things within the community. They put their roots down very deeply, and they didn't leave often. If they left, it was often for vacation and then come back. Fast forward to today, we are a very mobile society. I was born and raised in Salt Lake City, Utah. I went to college in California, in Southern California, which I consider a different state from Northern California, where we lived as a family. We now live in Arizona. We've been in Arizona for 12 years. When you look at all of that movement that we have done, that is not atypical. A lot of families experience that. And because of the blending of families, the blending of cultures, the blending of experiences, and the mobility of our society, our roots in the community aren't as deep. What that means is there's more tension when it comes to where do we take care of mom? How do we take care of dad? What do we do with the family cabin that nobody can get to now because it's clear out in the middle of nowhere and we all live in different states? How do we deal with the things that have emotional ties to us, but practically we just can't keep them and hold on to them? That's where, Eddie, we run into the challenges when it comes to administering estates, planning for families. And if I can just add one of my favorite quotes to the very end of this, and then I'll shut up for a minute and let you say talk.
Please, no.
That is a quote that was given to me 18 years ago when I very first started my career, and I've used it in almost every presentation since, and that is 90% of all problems with inheritance can be solved if the parents would just speak with their children before they pass away.
Instant. Okay. That's good. That's good. What about, I know we're going a little bit over. I don't think that the audience or myself would mind if we ask maybe a couple more questions. What's an example of estate planning going right that you'd like to share?
Well, estate planning going right. This is one of those things that when there's a problem, everybody sees it. Everybody notices it. We could point out, this went wrong, this went wrong. When estate planning goes right, the great thing about it is nobody notices. Why? Because it's so smooth that we look back and we go, yeah, we were able to administer mom's estate, sell the house, transfer the assets to the kids. We were able to have a great celebration of life and nobody was at each other's throat. We were able to process this as adults and as friends and as family. And therefore, it's hard to point a finger and say, hey, this went right, or this is what was right, or this is what we did that was completely amazing. I will say that estate planning is not an event. It's a process. And the process should begin when you're young. because that's how we name a guardian for our kids. But as we age, the things that we place importance on, the things, our goals, our objectives, our outcomes, the legacy that we want to leave, all of these shift a little bit. And because of that, our plan needs to shift as well. And so whenever you're talking with an estate planning attorney, you're going to want to ask that attorney, do you have an ongoing like estate maintenance plan, or is there an annual review? Even if you have to pay for it, buy it. It's worth sitting down with that attorney and doing it. Now, as a shameless plug for my business, we do it for free. We call it Planiversary, the anniversary of signing your estate plan. Come in every year for the rest of your life for free. Sit down with us, and we're going to walk through 3 questions. Changes in your family, somebody gets married, somebody gets divorced, somebody has a child. Changes in your finances, buy a house, sell a house, win the lottery, whatever it may be. And thirdly, changes with those knuckleheads in Washington. Anything that they do that's going to impact the plan that we already created, we want to stay on top of that. So definitely when you're looking for an estate planning attorney, and there's a lot of brilliant ones here in Arizona, look for someone who wants to create not just your documents, but a relationship that will touch base with you on an annual basis and make sure that your plan still meets the objectives you originally set.
Jake, you're speaking truth. We're loving what we're hearing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Biggest challenge. What would you say is the biggest challenge for you and your business?
Biggest challenge for the business. Wow. Every single day is a different new challenge. You ask me today, we're sitting here, in the middle of April. I don't know when this is live, but right now, our biggest challenge is there's not enough hours in the day. I think a lot of attorneys, a lot of professionals, a lot of businesses are faced with this labor shortage. And one of the things that I've done is I've spent a lot of one-on-one time with my clients. I do the initial intake. I do the drafting. I do the signing appointments. How many hours in the day does Jake have? Well, the same as you, 24. And I like to sleep and sometimes see those kids of mine. So right now, today, the biggest challenge is just finding the time. If you would have asked me, Eddie, last year, I would have said marketing, finding individuals and filling up the calendar. But we've shifted, we've turned that corner, and now we just need more time in the day. If you can help us, Eddie, we'd be glad to take your advice.
Well, thank you for that. Thank you for sharing that. Any last words there, Jake, with our audience? Any remaining thoughts that you would like to go ahead and leave us with before we depart?
Yeah, let me leave you with this. And it goes back to that quote that I mentioned. 90% of all problems with inheritance can be solved if children would just speak with their parents and parents would just speak with their children. If the waves of communication are opened, then we can solve a lot of problems. And I want you to know that anytime we bump into a problem, we often can trace it back to a situation where parents have spoken to 1 or 2 of multiple children and not to 1 or 2 of multiple children. I'm not immune from this. It happens in my own family as I look at the great generation that's ahead of me in my family, and I see that there's this belief that we need to keep things close to the vest, and we don't want our kids to know how much we have in the bank or what our house is worth or what we're making on an annual basis. And I get it. I have kids. I don't want my kids to know that either. But I also know that if we talk to our kids, explain why we did something. Eddie, if I have time to just share one quick story, I see this a lot. Mom gets ill. Mom needs to be taken care of. Mom moves into house of daughter number 1. Daughter number 2 is totally for that. Daughter number 2 is happy that daughter number 1 is taking care of mom. Mom lives with daughter number 1 for 3 years. During that time period, Mom says, look, daughter number 1, you have taken such great care of me. You've paid for my food. You've cleaned the house. You've driven me to appointments. When I pass away, you just go ahead and keep the bank account. Okay, that makes sense to me. I understand that. Mom now passes away. Guess what? Mom never told daughter number 2. Daughter number 2 says, we are equal children. We both came from mom. Mom wanted us to have equal. Look at the trust. Look at the will. The will says equal. Why are you keeping the bank account? Well, it's because the conversation was never had. So if I can leave the audience with anything, please, please, please have the conversation. When you make decisions, they might be uncomfortable. Hey, honey, I'm going to leave a little bit more to daughter number 1 because she cared for me for 3 years. It might be uncomfortable, but it will save relationships in the future. And I'll just leave you with that.